Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for tuning in this evening for our online Bible study. Let's get into it. I welcome you if you are new to this study. I'm Pastor Dave St. Aubin, and it's a joy to be with you here this evening. Tonight, we will be looking at the book of Ezekiel, chapters 41 and 42. So I invite you to grab your Bibles, open them up to Ezekiel 41, grab something to take some good notes with, grab a beverage, and grab a snack, and let's get into it. Well, again, good evening and welcome, and thanks for tuning in. I do pray that your day has been going well. Pray that you had a wonderful weekend. Happy Monday. Good to be with you here again as we continue our journey through the Bible one chapter at a time. And we are now in the home stretch of the book of Ezekiel. We are in chapter 41, and we're looking at 41 and 42 tonight. 48 chapters in this book, so we will be completed here sometime next week, Christmas week, after Christmas. But appreciate you being here and being a part of this study, whether this is your first time with us, or maybe you've been with us from the very beginning of the study way back in September of 2022, or maybe you've joined somewhere in between. I welcome you and appreciate you being here this evening. We've been looking at this later part of the book of Ezekiel, and what we looked at last week was this next vision that Ezekiel had, where he was taken to Jerusalem. In this vision, and God, through this guide, so to speak, this angel, this person made of bronze, which means strength, was showing him this new temple in the millennial reign, in the 1,000-year rule of Christ, this temple to come. And we saw in chapter 40 this description of what this temple looked like. Tonight, we're going to look at two more chapters that offer a description of what this temple is. And then tomorrow, we will look at the return of God's glory to it. So tonight, we're going to look at the holy place and the most holy place, and that the rooms, and then rather the rooms where the priests and the singers would be within the temple. So lots to look at here. Let's get right into it. Open up your Bibles to Ezekiel chapter 41. If you don't have a Bible with you, not a problem. We have all the verses up here on the screen for you so you can follow along. Take some good notes tonight. And I'll have some maps to show again because it provides a little bit better visual than just me reading the text to kind of explain what is going on here. But let's start with verse 1, chapter 41. Then this angel, this guide, brought me, Ezekiel, to the main hall, and then measured the jambs. Remember, he's measuring with two instruments, with a cord for longer measurements and with a rod for shorter residence. And he brought me and he measured the jambs. The width of the jambs was 6 cubits on each side. And so at the top of these stairs, which is on the right side of this diagram, you see these two columns next to the vestibule entering into the holy place. So in this vision, Ezekiel is brought to the outer sanctuary of the temple, the holy place, which was to the west of the vestibule. And the walls on either side of the doorway that led from the vestibule into the holy place, these side pillars, were each 6 cubits deep, 10 feet deep. So where you see vestibule, and to the left of that, the holy place and the altar, that little cut-in would be the jambs. Those were 10 feet deep. Verse 2, the entrance was 10 cubits wide. The projecting walls on each side of it were 5 cubits wide. And he also measured the main hall, and it was 40 cubits long, 20 cubits wide. So the width of the doorway itself was 16 feet wide. The projecting wall on either side of that entrance, which formed part of the wall of the vestibule and the holy place. So again, coming up the stairs, we see the columns, right? That's the first thing, the jambs. Those are 10 feet deep. And then we come into the vestibule, and projecting from the vestibule into the holy place, the room of the holy place, were these other cut-ins. And these were 5 cubits, 8 feet 4 inches from the side walls of the main temple structure that they cut in. Now, the holy place itself that we see here in verse 2 was 40 cubits long, which is about 66 feet, and 20 cubits wide, which is about 33 feet. So it's rectangular, twice as deep as it is wide. Going from east to west on this diagram, from right to left, the columns, the cut-ins, and then the holy place. Verse 3. And then this guide went into the inner sanctuary and measured the jambs of the entrance. And each was 2 cubits wide. The entrance was 6 cubits wide. The projecting walls on each side of it were 7 cubits wide. So in this vision, the guide goes into the most holy place and measures the doorway leading into the most holy place. And this doorway was 2 cubits, which is about 3.5 feet deep, and 6 cubits, which is about 10 feet wide. So the doorway from the holy place into the most holy place was 10 feet wide and 3 feet deep. And the projecting wall on either side of that doorway, which also formed part of the wall of the holy place and the most holy place, that dividing wall, that cut in 11 feet, 7 cubits from the side walls of the main temple structure. So from right to left, coming up the stairs into the vestibule, and then the entryway between the vestibule and the holy place, and then the entryway between the holy place and the most holy place becomes progressively narrower. It focuses in to the most holy place, the center of worship, which communicates increasing restriction to these areas and more controlled access. Because remember, only the priests were able to come into the holy place. Only the high priest could come into the most holy place. Verse 4. And then he measured the length of the inner sanctuary. It was 20 cubits. Its width was 20 cubits across the end of the main hall. And he said to me, this is the most holy place. So the most holy place was 20 cubits square, 33 feet 4 inches square. And this guide that is leading Ezekiel, he seldom speaks to Ezekiel, but when he does, he always identifies something important. And what he's identifying here is the most holy place. Now remember, Ezekiel is a priest. He's out of the priestly line, but he doesn't enter the most holy place in this vision, which is appropriate because, again, only the high priest had access to the most holy place in this time of worship for the Israelites. So here you see right to left, the stairways leading in, the columns, the cut-ins into the vestibule, and then narrower, the cut-ins between the vestibule and the holy place. The doorway's a little narrower, and then the doorway, the wall between the holy place and the most holy place, even narrower, and the room is smaller. And now in verses 5 through 11, we get a description of the side rooms of the temple. So verse 5, then he measured the wall of the temple. It was 6 cubits thick, which is about 10 feet, and each side room around the temple was 4 cubits wide. So the wall enclosing the vestibule, the holy place, and the most holy place, that surrounding wall was 10 feet thick. And then these rooms that were surrounding the wall on every side except the east, which is where the stairs were about 8 feet, 4 cubits wide. Verse 6. The side rooms were on 3 different levels, one on top of another, 30 rooms on each level. So there's 3 stories of these rooms, 30 rooms on each level for a total of 90 rooms. There were ledges all around the wall of the temple that served as supports for the side rooms so that the supports were not inserted into the wall of the temple. So there's another wall on the outside of these rooms, and that wall is what bore the weight of these 90 rooms so that the inner wall of the temple didn't have to support that weight. Now, we don't know the purpose of these 90 rooms. We aren't really given that here. More than likely, they were used for storage or for fellowship or even for worship. Verse 7, the side rooms all around the temple, both sides and the back, just not the front, they were wider at each successive level. So the rooms on the upper floor were the largest, probably because not as much space was required for a hallway and stairs once you got up to that upper level. The rooms on the second floor were not quite as large because more space was needed for stairs and a hallway, and then the rooms on the first floor were the smallest for the same reason. So the structure surrounding the temple, verse 7, was built in ascending stages so that the rooms widened as one went upward, and a stairway went up from the lowest floor to the top floor through the middle floor. Verse 8. And then I saw that the temple had a raised base all around it, forming the foundation of these side rooms, and it was the length of a rod, 6 long cubits. So the side rooms were on the same foundation as the rest of the temple, which was 10 feet above the level surrounding the courtyard. Verse 9. The outer wall of the side rooms was 5 cubits, which was about 8 feet thick. There was 20 cubits of open space between these walls, which was about 33 feet, and between any other structures surrounding the temple itself. So these other structures, it was built in such a way that these other structures didn't intrude on the holy space or the most holy place. Verse 11, there were entrances to the side rooms from the open area, one on the north, another on the south, and the base adjoining the open area was 5 cubits wide all around. So Ezekiel sees doorways in this exterior wall on the north and south sides. And so you see this between where it says walkway on the very outer edge and then side rooms. You see this doorway between these walls, these access doorways into the side rooms. And there was a 5 cubit wide walkway all around the exterior wall of the temple, which would have been about 8 feet wide. On the north and on the south. There was no walkway on the west side. And this walkway was on the same level as the top of the foundation of the temple. So it gives you an idea, walking up the stairs, the walkway, the foundation of the temple, the side rooms, at least the first floor, the vestibule, the holy place, the most holy place, all on the same level, and then there would be ascending floors up with 30 side rooms on each additional floor. So verse 12, the building facing the temple courtyard on the west side was 70 cubits wide. The wall of the building was 5 cubits thick all around. Its length was 90 cubits. So Ezekiel sees another large building to the west of this temple area that was 33 feet away from the west wall of the temple. And this structure is 70 cubits deep, which is 116 feet, 90 cubits wide, which is 150 feet, and the walls were 5 cubits thick, which was about 8 feet. So this structure that is 116 feet by 150 feet, 8 feet thick walls. And the function of this structure is unknown, but he sees it in this vision. Verse 13, and then he measures the temple, and it's 100 cubits long, which is 166 feet from front to back. The temple courtyard and the building with its walls were also 100 cubits long. The width of the temple courtyard on the east, including the front, was 100 cubits. So the outside walls, each wall was 166 feet in length. The distance from the back of the main temple to the back of the building behind the temple included an open space of 20 cubits, 33 feet, that separated those two structures. The inner court in front of the temple was also 166 feet square, 100 cubits. This is pretty good size, right? This is half a football field. Verse 15, and then he measured the length of the building facing the courtyard at the rear of the temple, including its galleries on each side. It was 100 cubits, and the main hall, the inner sanctuary, and the portico facing the court. So the outside width of the building behind the temple measured 166 feet, including a colonnade on all of its sides. And then this man also measures the temple's holy place and the vestibule and the porch that face the inner courtyard. So verse 16, as well as the thresholds, the narrow windows, the galleries around the three of them, everything beyond and including the threshold, covered with wood. The floor, the wall up to the windows, and the windows themselves were all covered. So the whole interior of the temple structure, including the side rooms, were paneled with wood. In Solomon's temple, which was destroyed, that temple was also paneled with wood, but Solomon's temple was overlaid with gold. We don't see that here. Verse 17, in the space above the outside of the entrance to the inner sanctuary, and on the walls at regular intervals all around the inner and outer sanctuary were carved cherubim and palm trees. Palm trees alternated with cherubim. Each cherub had two faces, the face of a human being toward the palm tree on one side, the face of a lion toward the palm tree on the other. And they were carved all around the whole temple. From the floor to the area above the entrance, cherubim and palm trees were carved on the wall of the main hall. So it's overlaid with wood. The wood was carved with alternating cherub, palm tree, cherub, palm tree. Each of the cherub had two faces, the face of a man, the face of a lion. One looked to the left, the other looked to the right. Cherubim is just the plural of cherub. The cherubim guarded the holiness of God elsewhere in Scripture. And within the carvings in the wood, aspirations of life and prosperity, which are symbolized by the palm, and aspirations of security, which are symbolized by the cherub, they merge together. Cherub, palm tree, prosperity, security. That's the visual of these wood carvings surrounding the walls of the temple. And so in Israelite thought, the divine resident of this house was the source of both of these things, prosperity and security. Verse 22. There was a wooden altar, 3 cubits high, 2 cubits square. Its corners, its base, and its sides were all made of wood. And the man spoke to me again, this is the table that is before the Lord. So this is speaking of the altar in the holy place, in this center room on this map. It was completely wooden, and it was 3 cubits high, 2 cubits square. So it would have been 5 feet high and 3 feet square. And it stood before the presence of the Lord in the most holy place. the function of this altar is kind of obscure, but it probably corresponds to the altar of incense or the table of showbread that was in the tabernacle in the wilderness or the earlier temple. And if that's the case, there's a connection here with prayer and remembrance. Verse 23. Both the main hall, the holy place, and the most holy place had double doors. Each door had 2 leaves, 2 hinged leaves for each door. And on the doors of the main hall were carved again cherubim and palm trees like those carved on the walls. And there was a wooden overhang on the front of the portico. So the doors leading into the holy place and the doors leading into the most holy place were double doors. They were hinged with 2 leaves on each door. And they were carved again with cherubs and with palm trees. And the floor of the vestibule of the temple, the vestibule, the holy place, the most holy place, all covered with wood. Verse 26. And on the side walls of the portico were narrow windows with palm trees carved onto each. And the side rooms of the temple also had overhangs. So this vestibule had this latticed type window and representation of palms and cherubs again in its walls. So Ezekiel had to have been impressed with the beauty of this temple. This structure was decorated in such a way that it truly glorified God. It spoke of the beauty of God. And that's chapter 41. Now we come to 42, and we see here the dressing rooms and the eating rooms of the priests. And this is a very difficult section to interpret because the description of these structures in the Hebrew text is very obscure, but we're gonna give it a go here. So chapter 42, verse 1. And then the man led me northward into the outer court and brought me to the rooms opposite the temple courtyard, opposite the outer wall on the north side. So now this guide takes Ezekiel back out of the north inner gate onto the outer court and shows him another building. So where we see here the walkway on the top of this map, that's the north end of this temple. And the guide would have taken Ezekiel out through this way to show him another area, another structure, another building. And this building stood between the separate area, the 20 cubit space that bordered the temple, and the building to the north. This was a complex of rooms in the outer court that stood against the north wall of the temple complex. Verse 2. The building, whose door faced north, was 100 cubits long and 50 cubits wide. So the length of this building, east to west, was 166 feet long. Its width, north to south, was 83 feet, and there was a door on each side. Verse 3. Both in the section 20 cubits from the inner court and the section opposite the pavement of the outer court. Gallery faced gallery at 3 different levels. So there were colonnades, there were covered porches, galleries outside this building facing the inner and outer courts, north and south. And these matching colonnades, as well as the structure itself, were 3 stories high. Verse 4. In the front of the rooms was an inner passageway, 10 cubits wide and 100 cubits long. Their doors were on the north. So the 16-foot wide interior hallway ran the length of the building right here in the middle of this diagram. Ran from east to west, and that hallway provided access to these rooms. Verse 5. Now the upper rooms were narrower, for the galleries took more space from them than from the rooms on the lower and the middle floors of the building, against the 3-story tall structure. So the rooms on the 3rd story were smaller than the ones on the second story. Those were smaller than the ones on the 1st story, because the colonnade on the 3rd story took more room than the colonnades on the 1st and 2nd story. So again, it's ascending in size as you go up. Verse 6. The rooms on the top floor had no pillars, as the courts had pillars. So they were smaller in floor space than those on the lower and middle floors. So the 3rd story, it didn't rest on the exterior walls that reached down to the ground. It rested on top of the 2nd story rooms. And so this 3rd story colonnade was set back from the exterior walls rather than being flush with the walls below it. So it gives you an indication of what that would have looked like. Verse 7. And there was an outer wall parallel to the rooms and the outer court. It extended in front of the rooms for 50 cubits. And while the row of rooms on the side next to the outer court was 50 cubits long, the row on the side nearest the sanctuary was 100 cubits long. The lower rooms had an entrance on the east side as one enters them from the outer court. So the north facade of this building, which faced the outer court, you see that at the top of this diagram, it was only 83 feet wide. The roof line was more than likely double that, 166 feet long, and there was open space 83 feet under the roof to the east of this facade. The south side, the south facade that faced the temple, was 166 feet long. The west facade was 83 feet long. The north facade was 83 feet long. So that gives you the dimensions of this particular structure. Verse 10. On the south side, along the length of the wall of the outer court, adjoining the temple courtyard, opposite the outer wall, were rooms with a passageway in front of them. These were like the rooms on the north. They had the same length and width, with similar exits and dimensions. Similar to the doorways on the north were the doorways of the rooms on the south. And there was a doorway at the beginning of the passageway that was parallel to the corresponding wall extending eastward, by which one enters the room. So you see the hallway down the middle, this long hallway, and then these spaces under the roof on the north facade, and then rooms butting up to the wall on the south facade facing the temple. Verse 13, and then he said to me, the north and south rooms facing the temple courtyard are the priest rooms, where the priests who approach the Lord in the most holy place will eat the most holy offerings, and there they will put the most holy offerings, the grain offerings, the sin offerings, the guilt offerings on that altar, for that place is holy. So this guide informs Ezekiel that the rooms to the north and the rooms to the south of this separate area, these rooms were for the priests. The priests would use these rooms when they ate the sacrifices that the people brought to the temple. Now, under the law of Moses, the priests would obtain parts of the burnt offering, the guilt offering, the sin offering, the trespass offerings. That all goes back to Leviticus 6 and 7. In this future temple, the priests will not receive all of the offerings. They will receive just parts of the grain offering, parts of the trespass offering. So there's the difference in the future. But this would be the rooms and where they would eat. They would also place their offerings in these rooms, and they also use these rooms as dressing rooms because the priest could not go from the separate area or the inner court into the outer court without changing their clothes. So these rooms would be used for changing areas. Verse 14, once the priests enter the holy precincts, they are not to go into the outer court until they leave behind the garments in which they minister, for these are holy. They are to put on their clothes before they go near the places that are for the people. So there had to be access into each of these buildings from the separate area as well as from the outer court. But what this shows is the holiness of the sacred space extended beyond the design of the temple complex to these auxiliary structures and to the conduct of the priest within these structures. So these are sacred spaces. And it's not so much the appearance of the building that is being stressed here. It's that these are sacred areas to the priests. And then the final verses, we see the dimensions of the temple enclosure. So verse 15, when he had finished measuring what was inside the temple area, he led me out by the east gate and measured the area all around. He measured the east side with the measuring rod. It was 500 cubits. He measured the north side. It was 500 cubits, used to measure by the rod. He measured the south side. It was 500 cubits, measured by the rod. And then he went to the west side and measured, and it was 500 cubits by the measuring rod. So he measured the area on all four sides, 500 cubits long, 500 cubits wide, this wall around it that separated the holy from the common. When this man, this guide, had finished measuring the temple and the structures that were associated with the temple, in this vision, he led Ezekiel out of the east outer gate. And he measures the exterior of the temple wall, and it's about 833 feet square on each of its four sides. This is a very large structure. I mean, we are talking 3 football fields square in length and width. It's a tremendously large area. And this was all measured with the measuring rod, not with the cord. The wall around the temple area was meant to separate what was holy from the inside, which was the holy place and the most holy place, to separate that from the outside, that which was common. It was used to separate. But in terms of the holiness of the area, it extended into the rooms where the priests ate, where they bathed, where they changed their clothes. The entire area was still holy, but that huge wall separated the two, the inner court complex from the outer court complex. And that is Ezekiel chapters 41 and 42. I know these aren't the most exciting of the chapters, but we're going to get into it here this week and what the purpose of all this is. But think of this is the new Jerusalem, right? The new temple. And this is all a vision given to Ezekiel to share with the people, to give them hope of God's presence returning among them in this new temple. Because remember, when the temple was destroyed, God's presence had left. That's what the Israelites used this for. This is where God dwelled. It wasn't just a place of worship. This was God's home on earth. So this would have provided some encouragement, some hope, a future that God would return to once again be among his people. So thank you for being here this evening. I do pray that this study is a help to you as we go through all these chapters. Tomorrow we will look at chapter 43 and the return of the glory of God to the temple. But thank you for being here this evening. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Stay safe and stay healthy. And I look forward to seeing you very soon. Till then, take care and God bless. Bye-bye.